Woo! Alright, that's my sound test for today. So, I've been thinking about this one for a bit now, and I've had conversations with people a lot where they'll have problems with like proprietary software, and I'll say, well, such is life with proprietary software. You chose to run this stuff and it's backfiring, so the solution obviously is to run better supported open source software when possible. And they start to ask me though. They're like, okay, but you use some proprietary software. Like I've got fucking Discord installed right here. I've got Steam. I've got like games and stuff. So I obviously use proprietary software, right? But there's a difference between using proprietary software that you can just install and using proprietary software that starts to set you on a dark path. And what I mean by this is I had already made a video about how DaVinci Resolve got the Linux cast first to install proprietary software. Then it turned into he needed a new graphics card. And then because DaVinci Resolve was so badly supported on its distribution, he had to just buy another computer and install Windows on it. So you get into this really bad situation where the example I'm going to bring up is my friend had installed Grand Theft Auto 5 and she wanted modifications for it. She wanted to mod GTA 5. Now, the mod loader is open source, but it relies on Windows hooks in order for it to work. So she's like, okay, well, I need either a Windows VM with GPU pass through, or I need to just install Windows on a separate drive. And I'm like, yeah, you can do that, but remember, you are now, because you're using this one program that needs proprietary software, you have now installed Windows again. So it has severely interrupted your control over your computer because you decided to run this one piece of software. And that's kind of what I'm getting at is when you're running proprietary software, it cannot interfere with the free software you are running. If you decide to run Linux as your daily operating system and you say, "Oh, but I need Windows for this one thing," remember that that one thing that's causing you to use Windows is causing you to use Windows. So if you can cut that out of your workflow by any means necessary, whether it be like some video game you really like playing, or if it's like having to use some specific office suite or like an audio plugin or something, because it's kind of like I said in my video about the 30-day Linux challenge thing, or like, oh, I can't get my super esoteric audio setup to work, so Linux will never get mass adoption. It is like, yeah, I mean, obviously software availability is always going to be a problem, and it's why I say you have to make sacrifices when you run a free operating system. You can use proprietary software, and this is something I kind of want to add in a future video where I kind of want to talk about Gentoo, because Gentoo itself is not a FSF endorsed distribution, because you can install whatever the hell you want on Gentoo. But it does have the accept license variable, so if you wanted to turn it into a totally free distribution, you can do that. And obviously, installing proprietary software on Linux does not mean that you aren't using Linux anymore. So that's kind of the extreme example, but once your proprietary software starts to actually take control over how you use your hardware or your software, like that's kind of where that is where the line has to be drawn. You can use Discord all you want, and that is where people generally say, "Oh yeah, proprietary software is fine, just use what works best." Yeah, because your proprietary software should not be interacting with your entire host operating system. You shouldn't be having this problem where you have to pick a distro based on this one piece of software. It should just work across every distribution. And that's kind of software that I choose to use is software where no matter what distro I'm using, it's going to work just fine, and I don't have to worry about it. So if it gets to the point where I'm using very poorly supported software, usually because it's proprietary and the developers just don't care about Linux, that is stuff that I need to get rid of. And so I just choose not to have it on my computer. So There is a purpose for dual booting, but in the end, your goal probably should be to start migrating away from that software. And what I did was I kept Windows on a second drive, and anytime I needed Windows for something, I would just boot into that drive. And I'm like, okay, I'll figure it out on Linux later, or I just need to do it right now, and then later on, I'll whatever, you know? But over time, it started turning into like weeks without booting into Windows. Then it turned into months, and then suddenly I wasn't using my Windows install at all for anything. And I was like, okay, now I can finally make the switch because it's been like a year since I've booted into Windows, and I don't need it anymore. There's nothing on the system that I'm not already doing or have an alternative to on Linux now. So that's kind of the I mean, obviously, like I told her, I'm not trying to shame you for using proprietary software. It's just this is kind of the fact of the matter, is you decided to use the software, and now you've got a separate computer running Windows on it to run this one specific piece of software. And I'm like, that's kind of a high price to pay, is having to run an entire operating system just to run one program. Like maybe if your job required you to run Windows, then obviously I'm not talking to you because like you don't have a choice in the matter anyways. Like what are you gonna do? Tell your boss I run Linux? Like that's not how that works. So that's kind of what I wanted to get at though. It's start thinking about where the line has to be drawn. And I think the line is drawn at I'm using proprietary software, but it in no way impacts anything else I'm doing with my computer. And that should be the line. If your proprietary software can run in a sandbox no matter what you throw at it, that's cool. At that point it's like, yeah, who gives a shit? But a lot of people are telling me that they need this proprietary software and it's caused them to completely change their workflow. They're like, oh, I got to install a different distribution. Oh, I got to go back to Windows. Oh, I got to do whatever else to hacky workarounds to get it working correctly. And it's like, don't do that. Just try to start thinking about how much control you want to have over your computer, because that's kind of the main takeaway from this, is that proprietary software does not necessarily mean the program controls the user. I mean, it controls whatever it can run in that little sandbox. Like Discord controls whatever I do within Discord, but it does not impact my Brave browser. It does not impact my Nicotine Plus installation. It's a non-issue. So I run all of my software in their own little bubbles, and I don't want those bubbles to interact with each other, basically. Because the second they start doing that, then I'm gonna have problems. That's where stuff gets really, really finicky, and it's just like I need it to. I need to have control over my machine. That's kind of the argument I'm making. So I think I've rambled on about that long enough. I probably repeated myself a bit too much, but that's kind of what I wanted to say. So I'll see. Oh, one more little announcement actually. If you made it to this long, like 8 minutes, 9 minutes or so, uh, a Facebook post was made advertising my video on Ubuntu is just Debian. I kind of wish I had talked more in it because, of course, after I record a video, I think of like 10 other things to talk about, and I should have mentioned stuff like Manjaro being basically Arch but with their own repositories and a lot of stuff being built on top of it, and I just didn't get around to it. But whatever, it's fine for a YouTube video. I mean, off the cuff kind of stuff. But I wanted to say, if you ever see my name out in the wild, you know where to contact me. Waffles at jabber.fr. I'm Glyphnode on Discord. I can post my username there. I'm on like all the main like Linux servers though. I've got Mastodon. I can post that and just like send me a message. I've even got Telegram if that's your thing. One person actually messaged me. That's how I got it. Was he messaged me on Telegram even though he knows me on Discord. So if you're interested in that, or sorry, if you I do like hearing about where people are seeing my videos, you know. So if you ever see like me on an Nvidius instance or something, like take a screenshot of it and just send it to me and be like, "Hey, I found your name." Or if you see me on Discord, just say, "Hey, I found your channel through whatever, whatever," you know. And because it's cool, you know, seeing that people are actually like spreading this information around and I'm not like stuck in a void, you know. So thanks for 400 plus subscribers now. That's really cool. I have no plans on really anything. You know, I just kind of think of stuff, or I'm talking to somebody about something and I'm like, hey, this would make a good topic for a video, and I just kind of shoot it off the hip, and that's kind of how my channels ended up. So don't expect any like huge changes or anything. The one thing I do want to do though, and I mentioned this to Josh, is I just went to a convention and there was all these lectures, and I was like, I kind of want to put together like a lecture on Gentoo, but I feel like I'm going to need the help of like a few people to make sure all my slides are correct and that I'm actually giving decent information instead of just misinforming people. So that may be a slightly different structured video, because I would be reading mostly off a prompter, but it wouldn't be like scripted. It would be a presentation where I have little bullet points and I can talk about them while I'm reading them, you know. So maybe expect something like that in the near future if I can come up with anything worth saying. But that's about it. All the announcements are over. Thanks.